All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go over synthetic division factoring. Now, regardless of the factoring technique you do, you always need to look for your greatest common factor. In this case, the greatest common factor of all four terms is 1. That doesn't change anything. Second thing you need to remember is this is a synthetic division factoring problem. However, if you see 4 terms, the first thing you should always do is check to see if grouping method will work on it. Because grouping method is a faster method. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that it doesn't work. I'm going to split it up. Greatest common factor of the first 2 terms is x squared. So I'm going to divide both terms by x squared. And I'll end up with a 3x minus 8. Then your second 2 terms are greatest common factor of your second 2 terms is 1. So I'm going to add 1. Divide each one by 1. You still get 3x plus 2. Now what you notice is the values in the parentheses right here do not match up when they're supposed to. If they match up, then grouping method works. If they don't, grouping method fails. So in this case, like I mentioned earlier, grouping method failed. So we have to go to a technique called synthetic division factoring. Now, the way we do this is we want to find an x value that makes this entire thing equal 0. So we're trying to find a 0 of this equation. Now, you have an infinite number of values you can pick from, so how do you narrow it down? First thing you need to do is find just the possible zeros. These are not all the ones that work, but something on this list will work. Okay? Sometimes multiple values on this list will work. Okay? So the possible zeros, you always have a positive or a negative value. The way you find the possible zeros of any equation is you take the factors of your last number, which is the constant, divide it by the factors of the leading coefficient. And LC for leading coefficient. Now, typically, you'll see it written like this, plus or minus P over Q. P just represents the factors of the last number, the constant, and Q just represents the factors of the leading coefficient. So I'll show you how that works in this problem. So we have possible values of positive or negative. Now, the factors of 2 are 1 and 2. Factors of 3 are 1 and 3. Kind of boring. So in this case, we could have positive or negative 1 divided by 1, which is 1, or 1 divided by 3, which is 1/3. All these are positive or negative values. I could also have positive or negative 2 over 1, which is 2, or positive or negative 2 over 3, or 2/3. Okay, so in this case, we actually have 8 possibilities. We have positive 1, positive 1/3, positive 2, positive 2/3, or negative 1, negative 1/3, negative 2, negative 2/3. So 8 possibilities we can choose from. At least one of these, when we plug it in for x, will give us 0. Now, my suggestion is always try positive and negative 1 first. Usually one of those 2 will work before you start trying the other ones. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and try positive or negative 1. So I'm going to put, let's do 1. Sorry about that bell. I'll probably make an announcement to say that that bell was incorrect. So I'm putting in 1 for all of my x's. When I plug that in, that equals 0. It actually worked. Okay, so that's what we want. Oh, here comes the announcement.
Please pardon the interruption. I apologize, the bells are off schedule. We're trying to work with that. Thank you. Please release the seats at 9:19.
So this is what we wanted. We wanted it to be 1 to the third, or not 1 to the third. We wanted this entire equation to equal 0. We found a value that worked. If 1 wouldn't have worked, I would have tried some other numbers like negative 1 or maybe positive 2. Okay. Now that we found one that works, that's actually what tells you what you put in the box. So 1 works, so I'm going to put it in the box. And we're actually going to do synthetic division factoring with these values. So if you remember, since it's x cubed, I'm going to put placeholders. We've got x cubed, x squared, x, and our constant. So for x cubed, I'll put a 3, negative 8 for x squared, 3 for x, and a 2 for my constant. First thing you do is bring down your 3, bring down that first number. And then 3 times 1 is 3. And you always add in synthetic division. So negative 8 plus 3 is negative 5. Negative 5 times 1 is negative 5. You add straight down, you get negative 2. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. You get 0. Now this should happen. That's why we want this to equal 0. This is called the remainder theorem. That tells us our remainder would have been 0 if we had done synthetic factoring, or any factoring, or not synthetic factoring. Synthetic or long division, any division involved in fact. So our answer right here would be 3x squared minus 5x minus 2. Now here's the dilemma though, or not the dilemma. This is the part most people forget. This one actually told you what one of your factors is 2. So your answer isn't just 3x squared minus 5x minus 2. We need to have another factor as well. Based on this one, we always do the opposite, you recall from synthetic division. So instead of a plus 1, we would do a minus 1. So one of our factors is x minus 1. Now, this is great. We have an answer now of x minus 1, and then 3x squared minus 5x. Is it minus 2? Yes, minus 2. Thing with the synthetic division factoring is you're usually not done at this point. If you recall in class, I said anytime you see an exponent of 2 or higher still left in your parentheses, there's a possibility you can factor more. So we need to check to see if it factors more. So if you notice there are 3 terms, that means we want to try our the grouping method that we're used to in class. So the grouping method with 3 terms, the way it starts is you multiply the first number by the last number, so we get negative 6. And then we want factors of 6, so 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. But they need to add up to negative 5. We always need to pay attention to signs though. So since it's a negative 6, that tells us one of the signs should be positive, one should be negative. So that means we're going to want to use the factors 1 and negative 6. So if we do our grouping method, we rewrite 3x squared. Then we put plus 1x minus 6x and then minus 2. And then we split it up and group. So greatest common factor is x for those first 2. We divide 3x squared by x, you get 3x. And x divided by x is a positive 1. Then your greatest common factor in the second 2 numbers is negative 2. Negative 6 divided by negative 2 is 3, so 3x. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is a positive 1. So we would get 3x plus 1, and then x minus 2. I thought I changed colors. Okay. This is the blue right here. But then don't forget that that factor we had back at the beginning also needs to be part of our answer. So we get x minus 1. And that would be your answer.